What is going on, Headliner Nation? We are back with our wide receiver analysis for week 14, also known as Bye-Mageddon. We have got 6 teams on a bye this week. Now, the good news is we're not missing like a ton of top tier options. Maybe a Chris Olave, Michael Pittman, Christian Watson, he's on a bye. He's been playing really well. So not a whole lot of guys that maybe were like huge assets that we were relying on. However, maybe you're dealing with injuries. Maybe there's something else going on, some ineffectiveness, and you need somebody to step in for you this week because maybe you're trying to secure that playoff spot. Maybe it's first week of the playoffs. There's a lot of different scenarios out there right now, so I want to make sure I cover as many guys as possible. Now, I'm going to let you know right now, there are some guys on the graphics that are going to be listed as sits that are actually going to be guys that I would start in certain situations. So make sure you turn your ears up. Turn those listening ears up. Make sure they're locked in and that you go through the entire thing with me because there might be some sneaky options we're adding this week. Ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into it. Kick it off with Thursday Night Football. The Las Vegas Raiders. I am going to list Davante Adams and Matt Collins as starts this week. I mean, Las Vegas is rolling right now, playing much better. Adams obviously dominating everybody that he comes in contact with. Matt Collins is a guy that really here, okay? The Rams are a pretty good matchup right now against the pass. The only thing that concerns me is that Josh Jacobs just runs all over the Rams and that's it. And Matt Collins doesn't see enough. Really, my hope is that Matt Collins makes the majority of his day in the first half when the game might be a little bit closer and it's not out of reach and they are just running it with Josh Jacobs. So keep an eye on this. Matt Collins, to me, is more of a safe wide receiver 3 play instead of any type of upside that we'd be looking for. We're hoping for a touchdown with him. For the LA Rams, I mean, it's a good matchup, but we're getting a backup quarterback or potentially Baker Mayfield, who has been there a total of a few days before starting this game. Actually, even less than that because he probably would have gotten there on Wednesday today. So he would probably be there less than 48 hours by the time he would start on Thursday night if he does play. So for me, I'm not even going to risk it with the wide receivers this week. I'm just going to stay out of that mess and we'll see what happens moving forward. The New York Jets, the Buffalo Bills, we've got some interesting options in this matchup. I mean, Wilson's balling out again. So Garrett Wilson is going to be a start with White under center and throwing as much as he has. Garrett Wilson is back to some of those high upside games that we've seen earlier in the year. One of my guys here that I mentioned a minute ago that are listed as a sit, but that I would likely start is Corey Davis. All right. 10 targets for Corey Davis last week. Now, granted, they threw the ball damn near 60 times, I think. And we're probably going to be throwing it against the Buffalo Bills as well. Josh Allen looks a lot healthier than what he has in recent weeks. I think they're starting to finally feel a little bit better on that offense and get moving in the right direction. So Corey Davis is a guy that I would take a shot at this week. Now, again, it's one of those things where his numbers just don't add up to 15. I mean, X factor, I'm not going to pump it up to 5 just for the sole factor of saying, hey, I want to list this guy as a start. Because he's not the big X factor in this offense. Garrett Wilson is. We're not 100% sure what's going to happen with the running backs this week either. Corey Davis to me is a guy that I don't mind throwing out there, especially like in a PPR league where if he gets 10 targets again, could easily get you 10 fantasy points. In a half PPR league, I'm really hoping for right around 8 to 9. If he scores a touchdown, great. I don't know if I'm banking on that. If it's a standard league, probably going to stay away from Corey Davis. And again, one of the reasons why I told everybody to listen. So if you're listening to this right now, drop a thumbs up on the video. Let me know down in the comments below. Kyle, we hear you loud and clear. Let me know in the comments so I know that you have been watching, okay? So Corey Davis, I do think could end up being a decent option for some of you this week that need it. For the Buffalo Bills, I mean, Stephon Diggs, obviously, we're going to be starting him. But the Jets do allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Their defense is excellent. So Diggs we're starting no matter what, but I'm going to stay away from Gabe Davis this week. Scored a touchdown last week, which was great to see, but he didn't do a whole lot other than that, obviously. So he was an okay play, but not great. In this matchup, I'm definitely not going to risk it. And then Isaiah McKenzie, kind of like what I said with Corey Davis. Like, Isaiah McKenzie is a sit for me. But if you are in a full PPR league where hey, if we get McKenzie 5, maybe 6 receptions, even if they're not big time yards, he still could end up getting you right around double-digit fantasy points. In half PPR leagues, I'm probably going to lean Corey Davis a little bit more than Isaiah McKenzie. And in standard leagues, I'm definitely out on McKenzie as well. So again, definitely some differences there that I wanted to know and why they're not just listed as not just listed as starts on the screen, so we can have that conversation, hopefully help you out depending on your league. The Browns in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati does allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And Cooper Kupp, he's going to be a high-risk start for me this week, and he's going to be lower in the rankings. My biggest concern is Deshaun Watson. You know, we talked about it in the What Just Happened video, recapping last week. This is a guy that hasn't played in a meaningful NFL game in over 800 days until last week. There's going to be rust. It's going to take time. He doesn't have any type of a rapport with these wide receivers because he barely got any time to work out with them. Those are all things that matter. And when we're just throwing him into the middle of our fantasy playoff run, it's hard for me to say, yep, absolutely trusting this guy. So Amari Cooper, he's going to be a start because he's seen so much volume and he's done well this year. He's going to be listed as a start. But for those of you that start him, just be prepared to have quite a bit of risk with it. So if you throw him out there as your wide receiver 2 and you have a wide receiver 3 spot, me personally in that wide receiver 3 spot, I'm going with somebody that has a whole lot of upside to hopefully offset Amari Cooper. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's back to being a sit for me this week again, just basically based off Deshaun Watson and the way that he's been playing. And with it being a tougher matchup. Ja'Marr Chase, you know, he's looking healthy. He's looking good. He's a start for sure this week for me. T. Higgins is going to be a start as well. He balled out while there was no Ja'Marr Chase. We know that they can ball out together. The X factor here for me is going to be 5 for Chase, 4 for Higgins. It's down to a 2 for Boyd. He didn't do anything when Chase was around. It's hard for me to anticipate him doing anything now. The one thing I would say, again, kind of this caveat, if you're in a PPR league, maybe you take a shot at Boyd. And the reason I say that is because no Hayden Hurst this week. It does look like Hayden Hurst will be out. And that point, that kind of makes, for me, Tyler Boyd the definite number 3. Whereas Hayden Hurst with healthy, it could be either or. If Joe Mixon plays this week, then that's a potential for a few more targets that could end up going to him. But for PPR leagues, Tyler Boyd would be a very, very risky start if you really don't have any other options. And for me, I would only kind of risk it as my wide receiver 3. Battle of Texas with Houston and Dallas. Did anyone else see the Dallas defense last week? I mean, it made the Indianapolis Colts look like a pee-wee football team. That is how good Dallas was last week. Just before I started recording, Davis Mills was announced as the starter for the Houston Texans, which is good for those of you that are holding on to his rookie cards and you want to sell him, but I wouldn't say for people who wanted to start anyone in this offense. I'm not going with Collins. I'm not going with Brandon Cooks. The way Dallas played last week, I don't want anything to do with it. Nothing. Okay? Davis Mills coming back. Dameon Pierce, I really don't want anything. Dallas just looked way too good last week, and I just think going up against Houston, it's going to be a rough day all day long for them. On the flip side, for the Dallas Cowboys, obviously CeeDee Lamb will be a start. Absolutely playing well right now. Fantastic over the last few weeks. Houston allows the 5th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but kind of like what we've talked about, one of the main reasons why is because teams run so much against them, which was Zeke and Pollard this week. They were both top 10 options last week. Absolutely could be again this week. So if we're looking at anybody to have a big week, okay, CeeDee Lamb will lock him in. A lot of people are going to be asking about Michael Gallup, especially coming off a 2-touchdown performance. But I need more consistency. The guy has been back and healthy since week 4, and last week was the first week that you could have put him in your lineup and actually got a fantasy viable performance. So it's great. I like Michael Gallup, but we're not going to risk it with a guy that's been so inconsistent so far against a team that they could just run all over and be done by halftime. Minnesota and Detroit will bring me to my Manscaped must-watch matchup. Make sure you head over to manscaped.com. If you got any Christmas shopping left to do, manscaped.com. Code word headliners when you check out. You're going to get 20% off your entire order, and you're going to get free shipping. Make sure that you don't miss out on that deal right there. Both teams are in the top 6 of most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Start them all. Start everybody. You get a wide receiver. You get a wide receiver. Everybody gets wide receivers. This matchup is going to be fun to watch, I believe. Now, the last time the Lions and the Vikings played each other, though, keep in mind, Justin Jefferson scored 2 fantasy points, I believe it was. Detroit committed all of their resources to just knocking Justin Jefferson around and limiting his day. Now, part of that is they were being very physical with Justin Jefferson, and there ended up being quite a bit of penalties because of it. I do think that probably the referee committee, the staff working this game, are going to be a little bit more weary of that and keeping an eye out for it. So I don't think they're going to be able to do the same thing. So Justin Jefferson, I'm still running out there. Adam Thielen, for me, is more of a touchdown play risk this week, because if you listen to my tight end video, you heard me talk about TJ Hawkinson, potential revenge game coming in. I think the Vikings are going to want to give him what he needs to really perform well in Detroit after that trade earlier in the season. I think that they're going to give him a lot of looks, and because of that, I do think Thielen has a very low ceiling this week, and his floor is also on the lower side as well. And really, if we play Thielen, we're kind of waiting for that touchdown. But again, they committed so many resources to Justin Jefferson last time that Adam Thielen was open quite a bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens at times this week as well. On the flip side, for Detroit, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a top 5 wide receiver for, he was a top 5 wide receiver for me last week. And people were like, I think your fandom's getting in the way. And I was like, is it really? And look at him, he was the wide receiver 2 on the week. It took an insane day from A.J. Brown to unseat Amon-Ra as the wide receiver 1. I mean, the dude is just way too good, and he's matchup proof. Like, there are no teams that have faced them yet have been able to find a matchup that will literally slow Amon-Ra St. Brown down. The dude is way too good. So that is why he's also going to be my prize picks prop to play. I'm going to go over on the 80.5 receiving yards for Amon-Ra St. Brown in this matchup. The Minnesota Vikings have a tough time stopping wide receivers. They have a tough time stopping big plays. If there's a big play wide receiver on this offense, it is the Detroit Lions' Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, over the last 4 games, he's over 100 yards 3 times. The one game he wasn't over 100 yards, he had 76. So he barely just missed that 80 mark right there. I'm smashing the over in this matchup. For me, DJ Chark had a big revenge game last week. Absolutely love to see it. Couple more big plays and maybe even a touchdown this week. Again, Minnesota has a tough time dealing with those big plays. They have a tough time limiting them. Give me some DJ Chark this week as well. The Detroit offense at home has been exceptional this season. We go from one of the best matchups on the slate to one of the worst matchups for wide receivers, because now we get the Giants and the Eagles. The Giants allow the 8th fewest fantasy points. The Eagles allow the 6th fewest fantasy points. So we go from 2 teams in the top 5 to most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers to 2 teams in the top 8 of least amount of points. It's 2 different matchups here. A.J. Brown will go as a start. The dude's on fire right now, coming off a huge matchup. He's going to be the guy that if they're working down the field, it's going to be A.J. Brown. Now, one thing we got to keep in mind is, how healthy is New York heading into this game? And we'll see more about that throughout the week. For Devontae Smith, I am going to list him as a sit this week, because really for me, Devontae Smith has been so inconsistent this year that I'm only risking it in those really high upside matches. And this one just doesn't have that upside that I would need to throw Smith into my lineup. Now, Richie James, Darius Slayton, Kenny Golladay, again, tough matchup going up against Philadelphia. I would like to give you Darius Slayton as a start this week because I think he's earned it. I think he has earned the opportunity to start in our fantasy lineups with the way he's been playing. But the reason he hasn't more is because he's not scoring touchdowns, so his ceiling is a lot lower than what we'd like. I mean, really what we're banking on is 4 to 6 catches from Darius Slayton for 40 to 80 yards, and he gets you a touchdown. That's great. It puts him over double-digit points. But if he doesn't get that touchdown, you're going to be teetering right on that 8 to 12 mark. Sometimes that can be a little bit too risky. So for me, Darius Slayton is a guy that really, he's like a wide receiver 3 start for me. If you need to start him as a wide receiver 2, my hope is that you have lots of upside everywhere else in your lineup. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, battle of the AFC North. Demarcus Robinson is going to be a start for me. Pittsburgh allows the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. And we've seen it with Tyler Huntley before. He makes guys fantasy relevant still. He had a very long stretch of games last year where he did just fine. So normally in certain situations where I'd be like, backup quarterback, not really feeling it. We've seen him play well for a stretch of games already in his career with some of the same weapons here and in the same system. I'm okay with Tyler Huntley getting us enough DeMarcus Robinson to make him fantasy viable. Diontae Johnson, George Pickens. They're both going to be starts for me this week. Now, I will say this, both a little bit riskier. One thing about Baltimore, let me give them some credit, because at one point this season, they allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers. They were banged up. They were beat up. They got knocked around in a couple of different matchups. But they have now fallen down to the 8th most. So the category that you see here where it shows a 4 for matchup, they've actually dropped out of that 5 range and they're slowly working their way down to 3. Now, maybe by the end of the season, they're going to be there, but it still shows just how good they've been. So even when you look at this and the numbers automatically make you think, hey, really good matchup here, it's a riskier matchup because they've been playing a lot better since the beginning of the season. So yes, I'm still going to go with Diontae Johnson, still going to go with George Pickens. Now, keep one thing in mind with Diontae Johnson. He sees insane targets, okay? He just hasn't really done anything with them. So if you need a wide receiver 3, I think throwing Diontae Johnson in there is just fine because he sees enough targets to actually be closer to a high-end wide receiver 2. But his production doesn't warrant that. So we kind of have to find that safe space with him and understand that if you're utilizing him, PPR leagues are absolutely the best. Now, George Pickens. Only 2 targets last week, and I have no idea why. Completely caught me off guard. I don't think they make that mistake again this week. I think Pickens gets the targets that he needs. I think a touchdown is greatly within the range of probability here, and I think he gives us more than enough points to be a start. Now, still some risk because of what we saw last week, but I'm willing to run him out there as a wide receiver 2 if I need it. Jacksonville and Tennessee, and get ready for Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. I mean, Tennessee got absolutely dismantled last week by A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I'm expecting the same from Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. Now, maybe not the 2 touchdown big A.J. Brown performance that we saw, but both of them absolutely fantasy viable. Tennessee allows the most fantasy points to wide receivers. I mean, Kirk and Jones are really good, really safe starts this week. Zay Jones' production hasn't been high, but he's got the targets. He's got more than enough targets. Christian Kirk's getting the targets and the production. Christian Kirk is going to be a top 10 wide receiver for me this week. I can almost guarantee it. And then for Tennessee, I mean, nobody. Treylon Burks would be a start for me this week if I knew he was healthy, but I don't. As of this recording, he's still in the concussion protocol. So that's one of those things that we're just going to have to update later in the week. Kansas City and Denver. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, if you're not named Travis Kelce, you can take a seat right over there. And that's my bench. If you can't see it, that's my bench over there. Denver allows the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And Mahomes has been spreading the ball around like crazy. And it's one of those things I brought up because a couple people asked me about Juju Smith-Schuster last week. And they were like, well, if he's healthy, how can you rank him so low? And it's one of those things where he's coming back from that injury. Yes, he's still kind of working his way back from the concussion. But they spread the ball around so much that if it's not a great matchup for me, it's hard for me to trust Juju. Because Mahomes just isn't locked in on one guy right now. So the upside is not really there for us. And those tougher matchups in the past when we've had Tyreek Hill, we know he's going to be locked onto Tyreek Hill after Travis Kelce. So it's easier for us to say, okay, even though the upside might not be there with production, we know that the floor could end up being there because he's going to get so many targets. We can't do that with Juju in these tougher matchups. So he's going to be a sit for me this week in a tougher matchup. Kelce, I think he bounces back. I think he'll be good. Now, Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton are both going to be starts for me. Hear me out. Hear me out before you get upset with me and say I can't trust either of them. I get it. I understand. First and foremost, we don't know what's going to happen with Courtland Sutton injury-wise, and that's why he's got a 3 rating this week. We'll keep an eye on it. All right, we'll keep an eye on it throughout the week. Hear me out, though. Kansas City allows the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I do believe Kansas City is going to win this matchup. And I believe their offense is going to end up being just fine. Now, just because I don't want to start any of the wide receivers doesn't mean none of them are going to produce. They could produce, but are any of them going to get 10 half PPR points for us? That is my concern, especially if Travis Kelce takes the majority of the touchdowns. okay? And if Pacheco's running the ball, we might even get some Melvin Gordon revenge this week. He was promoted to the active roster by the Chiefs, okay? So all these things combined, I still think they play well. I still think they beat Denver. So for me, they're going to have to throw the football. And yeah, Russell Wilson is crap right now, and this offense is crap. And I get it. You don't want to trust either of these guys, and I really don't want to either. But we know they're going to have to throw the ball. We know they've got a good matchup. We know the targets will be there. It's going to be up to Sutton and Jeudy to do something with them, okay? Sometimes it's okay to gamble on targets. None of you are starting Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton as your wide receiver 1. If you are, then you're already done anyway, so it doesn't matter. Normally, a majority of you have either already dropped them or B, wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 3, all right? It's okay to risk it with one of these guys if you've got a lot of safety with your lineup this week and you know that you're going to be good and really you just want to take a shot on someone that might have a little bit more upside. Like if you had to choose one of these guys or Darius Slayton this week, I'm going to go with one of these guys, all right? But make sure you tune into that rankings video on Thursday because that's going to help clarify some of these questions. Carolina and Seattle currently allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. DJ Moore and Sam Darnold, they're coming out of the bye together, but is it going to be enough? I don't think so. I don't like the matchup. I'm not going to trust it with DJ Moore this week. In fact, I was just talking about Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I'd be willing to risk it with one of those guys over DJ Moore this week, given the tough matchup. Now, for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, I mean, who would have thought that 14 weeks into the season, we would be sitting here talking about how amazing the offense has been as a whole for the Seattle Seahawks this year. It's incredible what Geno Smith has done, and he's made DK and Lockett both fantasy viable, both safe on any given week, and they both have tremendous upside as well. Both of these guys deserve to be in your lineup. The one little change that I will note here with DK Metcalf is for a majority of the season, Lockett has had a production of 4 and a volume of 3, whereas DK's had a production of 3 and a volume with 4. DK's been seeing more targets. Tyler Lockett has had more big games. DK just tied that up. All right, they're much closer as they are now. DK Metcalf to me is a little bit of a better start each week. Lockett's a little bit riskier, but will also bring a lot of upside with it as well. Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they're both going to be starts for me this week, and I don't feel great about either of them, all right? The San Francisco defense getting healthier, looking better, good, tough defense. I mean, I said it with Mike Evans last week. I ranked him as my wide receiver 29 last week. I got tons of crap in the comments about it. There was several of you that thought it was just one of the stupidest things I could have done. He was wide receiver 45. I still wasn't low enough on Mike Evans. He has struggled. He has struggled a lot. If you don't want to start Mike Evans, I get it. Chris Godwin is a start. We're starting Chris Godwin. He has been good the last several weeks. It's Mike Evans that we got to be worried about right now. But who are you starting over him? If you want to put Mike Evans on your bench, who are you realistically sitting that, or who are you realistically starting that you feel offers a much better potential than Mike Evans? And you Mike Evans owners out there, I want to hear from you. If you're sitting Mike Evans, who are you playing over him that you think really offers you much more potential? I'm still going to list Mike Evans as a start because there's not too many guys that we're going to do that with. Now, if you said that you wanted to, play some certain people over him, I'll let you know in the comments if I believe that's correct or not. And then, of course, the rankings will also help give you that insight as well. Now, for Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, we're going to Purdy this week. Mr. Irrelevant, last pick of the 2022 draft. Now, when he came in last week, he didn't look half bad. But I don't trust the situation this week with Brandon Ayuk. All right. Brandon Ayuk's been playing very well with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know if Purdy's going to be able to get the ball down the field consistently enough for Ayuk. So for me, this becomes a game where we already know San Francisco is really, really good in yards after the catch, yards after contact. Getting the ball to guys on short routes and letting them do work. That's Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. I do think Brandon Ayuk takes a back seat this week. I am going to list him as a sit. Now, with all that being said, if you need upside, over maybe some lower end guys. I don't mind Brandon Ayuk. If you're a Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton owner and you're like, I can't trust either of these guys. Well, you can't trust them. You can't trust Brandon Ayuk. I'm okay with throwing Ayuk in over them. I get it. I understand. I'd be willing to trust him and his potential upside a little bit more. But for this week, I am going to lean to Deebo Samuel a little bit more because I do think we get him, CMC, and George Kittle going this week in this matchup. Miami and the LA Chargers. Waddle is banged up. Can he play this week? We'll be keeping an eye on it. Now, Sherfield is a guy that I talked about in the waiver wire video. I'm not including him in here right now because unless Waddle were to be out, we're not playing him anyway. And honestly, are we going to play him even if he is out? There might be some other options out there for us. The Dolphins, I believe, are going to need Waddle this week. In order to win this game, I think they're going to need Waddle and Hill both healthy. I'm going to list them both as starts. If Waddle plays, he is still a start for me. If you want to say Kyle, I think he's more of like a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 option. That's fine. You're still starting over him over a majority of people anyway, so it doesn't matter. Mike Williams, we'll keep an eye on him, obviously, but right now, Josh Palmer, Keenan Allen will both be starts. Going up against Miami, we're going to have to throw the football for the Chargers. Miami has had some issues this season. They've been better as of late. They have had some issues this year with big plays to wide receivers. So for me, Palmer and Keenan Allen at this point in time, in a matchup where we're probably going to see a whole lot of passing attempts, they'll be starts for me. Monday Night Football, New England and Arizona. Myers is the only guy I trust for the New England Patriots right now. Definitely a guy with a lower ceiling and a lower floor, but he's a little bit closer to his ceiling than he is his floor just because that ceiling is a little bit lower. That probably makes zero sense to most of you what I just said because honestly, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it was really kind of the best way to explain Jakobi Meyers. If you put Jakobi Meyers in your lineup, you're not expecting anything huge, but you're just expecting, hey, get me 10 points and we're good with it, Jakobi. That's all we need from you. For Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown, I mean, there's room for both of these guys in this lineup. There's room for both of these guys to have high floors, high ceilings. There's room for production from both of them. I'm fine running them out against New England, even though it is a tougher matchup. These guys have enough big play ability to them. Let's just get them 5-6 targets each. We'll be good to go. And for that, that's it. That's week 14, ladies and gentlemen. Those are my wide receivers, start and sits. Make sure you leave me some comments down below. Hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners. I'm going to get out of here, though, so we can start taking a look at some rankings. I got some members-only stuff I'm working on this week as well. Keep an eye out for that. But I'm going to go for right now. Peace out, stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.